5th, 2024. Mr. Oshansky, call the roll.
Ball.
Present.
Jensen.
Present.
Maroney.
Present.
Scott.
Present.
And Zierden.
Present. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion for approval amendment of the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Madam Mayor, if I can just make one request. If we can add an email I sent to the council yesterday, if we could add to item 10B, the resignation of Assistant City Administrator Daniel Ike, please.
I'll restate my motion, approving the agenda as amended with 10B.
Second. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to open forum. Anyone have anything they'd like to come up and discuss not on the agenda today? Please state your name and address.
Bill Toft, Green Scene Drive, Breezy Point. I'm going to state some economic facts, and then I'll tie it all together at the end, and I'll be brief. If I were to give you $1, Mr. Jensen, every second, how long would it take to get to $1 trillion? It would take just a little under 32,000 years, and our federal government right now is approaching 36 trillion. There are more Americans right now working 2 or more jobs than any time in our history. Food shelf, the numbers I gave you last January, they are ahead of those numbers this year. In fact, the last 3 months, they served 1,700 people 2 times a month. So that's 3,400 people that are using the food shelf. We've all been to the grocery store. We know how expensive it is right now. 51% of Americans right now are giving up necessities to afford back-to-school items for their children. We also, what happened in the stock market today, we are on the cusp of a recession. I don't know how you're going to fund the last couple items that you voted on at the last meeting, but there's going to be at least 3 interest rate cuts, and one could be a half, one could be 3/4. If you wait till the end of the year, you're going to have at least 1% to 1.25% less in interest rate that you will have to pay out, in my opinion. Some folks have said there's going to be 6 cuts. I don't think there's going to be that many, but it pays to wait. You'll save us as taxpayers money. I want to read something real quick out of Thinking Minnesota. Our state government spent our entire $17 billion surplus on more wasteful spending programs with no monies left over for a rainy day. Don't these people have any common sense? It's too frequent a complaint, and it's frustrating for the voters and taxpayers of the state. Time and time again, leaders running our government mismanage our cities and towns without any personal repercussions. I ask all of you sitting in those chairs today, I implore you to exercise your fiduciary responsibility going forward about how you spend our tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we'll go ahead and close open forum and move on to the presentations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight we do have the honor of issuing 2, give me just a second here. I'm sorry. I forgot to let our consultant in on the meeting. I apologize. There we go. There we go. There we go. Okay. As I was saying, we have the privilege of issuing 3, technically 3, I should say, life-saving awards tonight. The first one, I'm going to ask EMT Officer Kyle Rustad if you could please come to the front. On July 4th, EMT Officer Kyle Rustad responded to an assist in Cross Lake with a report of an unresponsive male with heart problems. Upon arrival, Officer Rustad found the male subject had suffered a cardiac arrest. Cross Lake Fire had begun CPR and other resuscitative efforts. Officer Rustad established an IV and applied his heart monitor The patient was revived and transported to a high level of care. Excellent work yet again, Officer Rustad. And Officer Rustad, I'm going to ask you to stay on the front. And if Sergeant Joe Garcia, if you could please join him and Mayor Zierden. On July 13th, paramedic Sergeant Joseph Garcia and EMT Officer Kyle Rustad responded to a reported heart attack. Officers arrived on scene in 1 minute and began resuscitative efforts, including the use of a heart monitor, delivering 8 shocks. The male patient was revived and flown to the St. Cloud Hospital. Again, excellent work to Sergeant Garcia and Officer Rustad. These life-saving events are made possible to our partnership with North Memorial and the paramedic and EMT programs. So we do want to thank them for their partnership as well.
Thank you all. We're very proud of our police department. Okay, we will go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll go on to the new business. City Council wages discussion. Chair Chansky?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is a follow-up to our budget discussion last year. As we are now starting that, we're into that. Last year, as part of the development of the budget, you had a discussion about reviewing the council's wages. It's been a number of years since that was updated. At that time, the discussion was because per state statute, wages cannot, any change to wages cannot go in effect until after the next regular general election. The discussion was, let's have this, bring it back as part of the 2025 budget, and we'll discuss it then. So that's all I'm doing tonight. In the packet, you'll see I did do a survey of a number of surrounding communities to get a grasp of where they're at. There were 9 communities that responded, so Brainerd, Baxter, Crosby, Cross Lake, Jenkins, Little Falls, Nisswa, Pequot Lakes, and Walker. You'll see I have broken down, those are monthly wages. Currently for Breezy Point, council members make $300 a month, the mayor makes $350. And there's no other additional benefits. You can see the breakdown per city. I listed what the monthly rate for the mayor is, the monthly rate for the council members, and if they have any additional benefits. You'll see a number of the cities do have an additional fee or additional payment for every additional meeting. I know it was something you actually discussed a little bit last month. Brainerd is kind of the odd one out that does actually provide insurance benefits to their council members. And then Walker has a formula for training where they reimburse for training, hours spent doing training. Also, while doing this, I also just reached out and asked them, in addition to their council, did they compensate any of their committees? Currently, the City of Breezy Point compensates the Planning Commission only. Those members get $40 per meeting, and the chair gets $50 per meeting. That's been the rate since 1994. And you can see there, again, I listed the cities, those 9 cities, and what they do. Again, it's kind of, when it comes to committees, it's kind of across the board. The Planning Commission is a normal one that most cities will compensate. Others do, Nisswa does their Parks and Rec Advisory Commission and their Public Works Committee in addition to Planning Commission. Little Falls compensates all of their committee members. And then Baxter, all of their committee members as well. So you can just see what that's in there as well. So really all we're looking for today, I'm not looking for anything specific. any specific number. But as later on tonight, we're going to be scheduling a workshop to have our budget, to discuss preliminary budget. It would be helpful to have some guidance that if you are interested in looking at changing the council's wages, it would be helpful to have some direction on what that might be so I can come prepared for the preliminary budget discussion. If you want to take no action, now would be the time to let me know that as well, and we'll just keep it as is for the budget process. So I'll take any questions the council might have.
I do have one question, Madam Mayor, is I know it's, we cannot change the council salary until after the election. How about for our elective committees, Parks and Rec, Planning and Zoning?
To
Can
my
those?
knowledge, they are not elected officials, they're appointed, and you can change those at any time.
Okay. That was only one large inconsistency that I saw, is that while I've never heard of a complaint from our Parks and Rec, our new road committee, but that's one area that I saw that we were different of from a few others of something. Again, I've never heard of anybody complaining. We greatly appreciate all those who volunteer their time for those committees, but that was just one idea that I had. But if those can be changed at any time, that was the only thing that stood out to me.
Anybody else?
I'll make a motion that we don't take any action at this time on pay increases.
I'll second that.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you for that direction.
All right, we'll move on to Assistant Administrator Ike's resignation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So as I provided to the City Council yesterday over the weekend, I received the resignation of Assistant City Administrator Daniel Ike. It was a letter, I wasn't able to add to the packet because it came out, got it this weekend. Just says, Dear Administrator Chansky, the purpose of this letter is to officially inform you and the City of Breezy Point that my final day of employment with the city will be Friday, September 6, 2024. I've greatly appreciated the opportunity to work with the City of Breezy Point and would like to state it is a lovely, friendly, and beautiful community. It has been a privilege to work here. I am certain the city will find great success with whoever is hired to replace me in this position. I wish you and everyone at the City of Breezy Point the very best in everything that you do in the future. So what I'll just be doing as we do anytime we have a vacancy like this, is looking for the council to accept Assistant City Administrator Ike's resignation. As I said in my email to you as well, I'm not at this time requesting immediate authorization to post and rehire. As I do when vacancies open, I like to take a little time just to evaluate, make sure we're addressing all the needs of the city. My intention would be bring a recommendation, have that as part of the budget discussion that later this month, and then take a formal action in September with what I would recommend we do with the position.
What are some other conditions that are associated with the resignation?
I agree that through his final day, we worked out a work from home situation.
Can you explain a little bit more as to why?
I will not go into that. That's I really am not comfortable in a public setting going into a personnel issue. He's just requested that due to some of the reasons behind the background of his resignation that he be able to work from home. If he was not able to work from home, his resignation would have been a 2-week notice with terminal leave. So this allows him to finish up some of the projects, gives us some time for transition as well. So I think it works in the best of both the city and Mr. Ike.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the resignation.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, we'll go on to City Hall project bonding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Let me get back down to where I'm going here. Here we go. As was discussed during your special meeting July 18, when you accepted High Tech Construction's not to exceed bid of $2.95 million for the City Hall remodel and expansion project, requested to have this item on the agenda to discuss and decide when it comes to bonding, how much you wanted to bond, whether you wanted to bond the full project cost or something less than that. Attached in the packet was some preliminary bond runs that Michaela Huat and Baker Tilly conducted for us. They just did 3 of them, the full 2.95 million, 2.5, and 2. Obviously, you can go anywhere in between. I think it just gave you an idea of what kind of those steps would look like. And then we'll go over a bonding calendar. Michaela's on with us, and I'll let Michaela jump in just a minute, and she can run you through all the runs, as well discuss the bonding calendar, all the different elements that are in that. It's very similar to what she presented back in June, just with some specific dates now that we are moving forward with this project. As Michaela will discuss shortly, if the council does choose to move forward with bonding today, again, one of the things we do have attached in the packet, and we're recommending that you do, is there is a reimbursement resolution attached. This is similar to what you did when you purchased the ladder truck on behalf of the Pequot Lakes Fire District earlier this year. It gives you up to 18 months to bond. So if you pass this resolution, if you want to wait, heeds maybe some of the advice from Mr. Toft, and you want to wait and see if rates go down or something, or want to wait and then bid later, 6 months, a year from now, I'll go out to bond. That allows you to do that as well. If you do choose to move forward with bonding tonight, though, we are recommending that the public hearing on the CIP be conducted on September 3rd, and that then a special meeting be set for Monday, October 21st. That would be the date the bonds would be sold and then presented to you for approval. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michaela and let her go through all the details.
Thank you, David. Good evening. Just to kind of piggyback off of what David had said, we did provide 3 bonding scenarios based on financing a total project cost of $2.95 million, and then various levels of cash contribution from the city that would adjust what the actual bonding amount would be and the annual levy. And just to give kind of a range of what the annual levies would be, again, looking at financing 2.95, if we're looking at a par amount between 2 million, 2.5 million, and 3 million, based on the level of cash contributions being $1,500,000 and 0 respectively. The average annual debt service just for the City Hall project would be in the range of $190,000 with $950 cash contribution, $238,000 with a $450 cash contribution, and then average annual debt service of about $280,000 with no cash contribution in bond financing for the full amount.
I'm sorry, can you clarify what page are you on? What are you looking at so that we can follow? I don't know what information you're looking at.
I think she just quickly
So I
ran
am
through all 3.
Oh, well.
Sorry, yep.
Yeah.
I did a summary of the 3, David, I believe in the packet, the 3 bond issues based on the different cash contribution amounts. And I just provided an overview summary of what each of those debt schedules are, but I can certainly walk through them individually if that would be easier, as well as these, and then into the schedule of events and the anticipated timing.
I'm just curious to know on what page can we find the summary?
Well, there's not a master summary. There's a summary of each run.
Right. So if we're looking at the summary I provided, or that I just walked through, is talking points that I put together for this meeting, for this call. If we wanted to look at the individual debt structures, which should be in the packet, I can walk through the 3 scenarios of the debt structures, focusing on the capital improvement portion, which is what's would finance the City Hall project.
I see. So you're looking at talking points that you prepared for yourself and the council doesn't have them?
It was more to provide a summary of what the main points for each of the bonding scenarios are. But if you've got the pages for each of the scenarios, we can walk through what the numbers and the takeaways are for each of those.
Does the council have a preference? Would you like to walk through each one individually?
I think that would be
Okay, Miguel, why
preferable,
don't we start with them individually, and we'll start with the full amount.
Okay. So in the first scenario, looking at total bonding amount for both projects would be $4,475,000. And that again includes the capital improvement portion, par amount of the bonds of $3,030,000. Equipment portion is $1,445,000. And I will say for the equipment portion, that's the same in all three scenarios. But the total bonding, if we're looking at including both these projects, would be $4,475,000. If we're looking at, this is on the sources and uses page. This is assuming that the project cost amount that has been verified of $2,950,000 as the deposit to the project construction fund to finance the city hall. In this first scenario, with the par amount of the $3,030,000, there is no cash contribution, so it would all be financed. Also included would be the estimated cost of issuance, the underwriter's discount, and then the small rounding that would be added to the deposit to the project fund. So when looking at the capital improvement portion, the total uses would be $3,030,000 to match the total sources, which would be the par amount of the bonds, just looking at the capital improvement. And then when adding the equipment portion, the $1,445,000 and both the sources and uses, the total issue summary is the $4,475,000. That includes the financing for both projects. So again, in this scenario, it's all bond finance, no cash contribution. And if we look at the third page, which would be the debt service summary, this is assuming a 15-year term. This debt service summary page includes the estimated total debt service, principal and interest payments, and the 105% over levy for both of the bond issues. So the total annual P&I would be average of about $391,000. Looking at the total P&I category, and then the 105% over levy is about $410,000. If we focus on just the capital improvement portion, which would be the next page, the $3,030,000 for just the capital improvement bond portion. Again, it's a 15-year schedule. The total principal and interest is estimated to be an average of about $266,000. And then the 105% over levy is the last column, which is about $280,000. So in this first bond scenario, this is assuming financing for the full $2.95 million for the City Hall project, with the average annual debt service of about $267,000, and then the over levy of about $279,000 average over a 15-year period. And then the last page is just for the equipment portion, and you'll see in all three scenarios we walk through, the debt service on the equipment portion is the same of $1,445,000 as the par amount of the bonds, and then the annual debt service principal and interest is about $126,000, and then the 105% over levy is about $133,000. So that is a summary of the first bond option, assuming no cash contribution and debt financing for the full project amount.
And so just to clarify, when we're talking, you're making reference to financing 2 projects that includes the cost of the commitment to build City Hall and the reimbursement of the ladder truck that was purchased? Do I have that?
Yep, yes, that is correct, that this bond scenario, while it looks at them individually that I walk through, it also is showing you as a combined issue if you chose to finance both projects at the same time. That's what the numbers that I'm walking through is both breaking out just the capital improvement portion as well as the equipment portion. Like I said, the equipment portion is assuming that you would finance it at the same time as the capital improvement portion piece, and that and in all 3 scenarios, the equipment portion is the same.
Anybody else have any questions?
Okay, let's go to the second one.
Okay, scenario, scenario, the second scenario is based on, I'll just go in order. So that one would be based on 450,000 of cash contribution. So in this scenario, if we're looking at on the same page, or starting with the sources and uses page, excuse me, the total bond amount would be $4,020,000. The capital improvement portion, again, to finance the city hall, is the par amount of the bonds is about $2,575,000, with the city cash contribution of $450,000. So the total sources in this scenario is about $3,025,000. Looking at the uses, again, the deposit to the project construction fund is the same at $2,950,000, and then cost of issuance, underwriter discount, and then the rounding is remaining deposit to the project fund of $4,540. So the total uses to match the sources is the $3,025,000. Again, the equipment portion, this is assuming that they're being financed together. So all of the assumptions on the equipment portion are the same as the previous scenario, assuming a bond financing for the full amount of the that project. And then in this scenario, with the 450,000 of cash contribution and the 4,020,000 of the par amount of the bonds, when we're looking at the total debt service summary page, the estimated principal and interest payments are around 350,000 per year, within the 105% over levy of about 368,000. And then if we looked at the next page, again, just looking at the capital improvement portion for the city hall, that bond par amount is about $2,575,000. And then the total principal and interest average payments is about $225,000 over 15 years. And then the 105% over levy is about $236,000 average. And then again, the last page is the same debt service schedule that saw in the previous scenario with the equipment certificates, 1.445 million bonded amount for the ladder truck.
Does anybody have any questions on those 3 scenarios?
And then I do have one more scenario to walk through with a different upfront city contribution amount. If there are no further questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the third scenario that we provided, this is based on the total bonded amount for both projects would be about $3,515,000. This includes contribution of $950,000 for the City Hall capital improvement portion of the project. So the par amount of the bonds would be reduced to $2,065,000. Total sources would be $3,015,000. The deposit to the project fund, again, the same of the $2,950,000. The cost of issuance, the underwriter discount, and then the deposit to the project fund. So the total uses in this scenario would be $3,015,000. And again, the equipment portion is the same scenario. So in this one, on the next page with the $950,000 upfront contribution, the total debt service for both projects, if you decided to proceed, would be about $305,000 as the average total principal and interest over 15 years, with the 105% over levy of about $320,000. And then if we're focusing just on the capital improvement portion, again, that bond amount is $2,065,000 with the rest financed as cash. The total principal and interest over 15 years is about $180,000. And then the 105% over levy is about $188,000 on average over that 15-year period.
So in that scenario, well, really in all the scenarios, but I'm focused on that particular one, recognizing over the life of the bonds, the interest that we're paying. What's the idea around coming up with $950,000 down when we've spent cash of $1.4 million for the ladder truck? We're talking a difference of $500,000. Granted, that's a lot of money, but we're going to spend more than that in interest. So can you help me understand why we would want to, in this bond scenario, come up with another $950,000 in cash?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, I think that's one of the questions for discussion is, doing a comparison of, what the average annual debt service would be in each of these based on the cash the upfront contribution, and how that correlates to total interest that you would expect to pay over 15 years. I know in a prior the prior work session conversation we had on financing and bond financing, we also discussed, if there's an option in the future, or when you would include a call provision in the future for the potential of refinancing if rates come down, at that call period when you're able to refund the bonds. But I think that's part of the conversation is it's a little bit of the opportunity cost of the cash contribution for this project or other projects, and then how it compares to what the average annual debt service would be, including, as you said, between the principal and the interest over the 15-year period.
I think it would have been a little bit easier to digest if it were side by side.
I don't have a way to put them side by
Right.
side.
So just kind of looking at it, so basically, in the first scenario with no cash in, we are looking at,
I can get there in just a second. So this is one more up there. So first scenario, that would be one more up. There we go. So looking at focusing on the city hall piece.
yeah,
No cash. It's all bonded. Total interest of approximately $947,587 versus I think the previous one was what, 640. That's about 300,000
Yeah.
difference.
Yes, so total debt, right, so total interest with no cash contributions, about $947,000. If you're looking at a $450,000 cash contribution, total interest is about $805,000. And then if you're looking at $950 of cash contribution, total interest is about $646,000, to give the range of what the total interest payments are projected to be over 15 years, based on current rates and assumptions for timing of the financing. As another comparison of if based on the existing cash funds, what the anticipated investment rate and how if those funds are invested or how they would be used, as another comparison as when looking at what the total interest paid in each of these scenarios.
So I think the question really becomes, the difference of the 450,000 to the 950. Do each of those make enough of basically a contribution that we feel comfortable paying that amount of interest? What is typically the best way cities will balance that out with how much cash they have on hand? Like, is there formulas, or like, how do cities typically look at that? Like, I mean, how much value is $500,000 to the city versus saving ourselves 200,000 in interest over the life of the 15 years?
I guess it depends in the situation with the city of Breezy Point with our current cash balances and the capital fund. It comes down to what other projects do you want to do? If you've got other things coming that you want that extra liquidity for, then that's when you would look at, okay, balancing having that liquidity versus paying an additional roughly $150,000 in interest over 15 years. So we're talking $10,000, roughly $10,000 a year. Versus if you're going, we're
that was my next
comfortable
question.
drawing down our cash balance allows you to pay less interest. That's
Right. So you're saying that the difference was about 10,000 a year.
Oh no, I was just saying $150,000. Yeah. Again, that's a
Of interest only.
rounding. Yes, it's about
Yeah.
10,000 a year. If you're paying 115,000 more over 15 years, divided
Right.
150 by 15 is 10. Then that's between each step.
If interest rates did decrease 1/4%, 0.5%, do we know what that difference would look like as far as the total interest and life of the loan? Did we look at that scenario and if the rate's dropping, what that would be?
Michaela, do you know?
Mayor, members of the council, yeah, in regards to, future interest rate sensitivity, the rates that we've included here are based on, like I said, assuming an October sale and what we think the rates are today based on the city's rating for this project, and then the timing for the issuance. We have not done further sensitivity on, if, like I said, we discussed earlier, if there's a call feature added to the bonds, there are present value savings tests that have to be met before with bonds being issued. And that's something that we would look at, but if there's additional sensitivity that, you'd want to see on what the rates may be, that's some additional kind of outlook into the future as far as that, those comparisons. One other item I was going to respond to regarding the debt versus cash financing, typically what municipalities will do is try to finance, based on the life of the asset, and try to use, bond financing for those projects that are either longer term assets as compared to, saving cash for, say, equipments or other facilities. So I think as David had mentioned, part of that part of the response to that question is, what are the city's long-term capital needs? And what of those projects makes more sense to be debt versus cash financed? And that in part will impact how much cash is available for this project, as well as what the different bonding authorities are for certain projects. That's another component of if it makes sense to borrow versus pay cash. So it depends on the projects, the longer term capital improvement planning, capital needs, and then what's the projects being financed.
And I'll just piggyback on Michaela. So we kind of talked about it a little bit at the special meeting when I presented the draft of the capital improvement plan. And if you remember, in that scenario, based on what we had in there at that time, I said if you seeded that plan with $1 million, it was roughly an additional $288,000 per year to float the thing over 20 years or 21 years, how I had it. If you were to bond, again, to what Michaela was putting into real life, if you bonded the whole thing, the idea is you might want to do that so then you can put more cash that we have in hand and reserve that to the capital improvement plan. Say that goes over here, it's used for these uses, and then allows you to have to potentially levy less per year to fund that plan.
But nevertheless, we are looking at in all these scenarios a tax levy increase to support the debt service.
And as we've discussed, we have existing levy dollars that can be used to cover this.
I think the question that was put out there is the question that I've had all along, which makes any bit of incurring debt at this point very foolish, in my honest opinion. We have no plan. We know we got a range of all kinds of capital investment needs long-term in this community, but we have not taken the time sufficiently to figure out what exactly those needs are. We know we have roads that need to be improved well beyond Bushman. We know we have a variety of other capital investment needs, and we have no plan. And yet the council decided, well, you know what, moving forward with the project to the extent of $3 million for City Hall, yeah, it makes sense. Well, you know what, let's commit almost $4 million to Bushman Road as well. So we're sitting here with $7 million in capital investments being committed without having a plan. I'm sorry, that just doesn't make any sense.
Well, these are both
I
projects
know you've
that-
heard it before, and I will continue to speak to that. This is not the time, economically or otherwise, to be moving forward with these kind of financial commitments.
They just want to say that the debt service for the ladder truck will be paid for by the Pequot Lakes Fire District.
Correct.
Are this Pequot Fire District or Pequot also going to help invest in our roads and our other capital needs?
No, I'm just saying that if we move forward that bond, how it'll work is that $126,118.38 for next year's bond payment, what'll happen is when comes time to pay that, we will invoice the district, and the district will cut us a check for $128,118.36.
Correct.
Do we have any understanding at all? I mean, is there somewhere an inventory of sorts of the next 20, 30 years worth of capital investment needs in the city?
That was the draft capital improvement plan that I presented 3 weeks ago.
Which was mostly equipment orientated, was it not?
Correct, which is a big
Okay.
part of our liabilities, equipment.
But we're missing out a huge component of money it's going to take to improve roads from gravel to pavement, right?
Correct, which we're working on.
To look at sidewalks potentially, to look at a number of things. So while I appreciate we have a plan, or at least the semblance of a plan to move forward in identifying our capital equipment and related needs, that pales in comparison to the next 20 to 30 years of overall capital needs in this community. I mean, we have areas that have been on septic for how many years now that are going to require sewer. I mean, the list goes on and on. I just can't continue to sit here as an elected official and think that this is anyway a good plan or a good approach.
I think to piggyback on what Brad says, you know, we can look at each one of these scenarios, but in reference to Brad stating the long-term plan, you know, we have the equipment CIP. You have Bushman Road. We've already determined there's no money for the street CIP. So with each one of these scenarios, what does that give us bonding capacity and cash remaining? We've had it in past discussions, but it doesn't provide that here. I mean, I understand it's, you know, focused on the bonding, but, you know, we have other expenses. And with each project, you know, what does that leave to bond, and what do we have cash on hand?
Which Councilman Jensen have discussed before of sometimes it kind of becomes, sometimes it's how you want to do it can be considered, I'll just say robbing Peter to pay Paul. We talked about a little bit 3 weeks ago about if you paid cash you know, for this project. I estimate you still have roughly $2 million left over in the capital fund, plus you still have that 572 we've always been talking about for a future bond. If you use, say we bond this whole amount for here using the scenario, 267,688.50, we'll take that out of the 572, so ending up back at roughly what, 310 still in levy dollars that could be used to support a future bond or a CIP levy, and you still have all of our capital cash you can use towards a future project. So that's, I guess, and then there's everything in between.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be projects that are going to need to be paid for. Every city faces this. I think really the question at hand tonight truly is, how do we want to fund this project? And I think that it's just going to have to be a combination, like we kind of discussed. So it's really about what we feel comfortable doing.
Well, in that way, in my opinion, it's water under the bridge. It's too late. You've already made a $3 million commitment to a new city hall.
Correct.
And you've made nearly a $4 million commitment to Bushman Road. So $7 million into it, and we're just starting to figure out what the approach and plan looks like. I don't know how you guys run your finances, but I usually have a plan of looking out several years down the road in terms of where I need to be with liquidity and how much do I get myself in debt. And yet, this is being approached completely backwards.
Well, and debt is not always bad. Debt is used all the time to finance projects, especially when you're looking at the balance of cash on hand. So I don't believe that all debt is bad. I think at this point, again, it's just figuring out what that combination will be for this project. Councilman Maroney, do you have any thoughts on the three scenarios?
You know, listening to Mr. Scott, Mr. Jensen, you know, if we want to wait until the plan, I mean, we do have a resolution in front of us that will be on next, that we do have 18 months to consider where we want to sit with bonding. So if you want to see what amount of cash on hand we need to invest into the capital improvement plans for streets and equipment to know what that cash is out of pocket, that we can certainly pause on the bonding issuance so we can see where that cash on hand of what we need to start that funding process. And that way it might tell us more of what we feel comfortable about of putting cash out for this project. If it's 950, maybe it turns out to be less, that we don't need cash on hand due to the capital improvement plans and how they all lay out. So we do certainly have that option of delaying it on what we do with the bonding to see what happens there.
And interest rates could decrease.
You stopped short
Councilwoman,
of saying delay in any commitment financially of taxpayer dollars. That's where you had me there for a while, Mike, but it completely went off the rails when there wasn't any further qualification or clarification on holding any and all spending. I mean, what is waiting going to do at this point? The council is millions of dollars in financial commitments.
Councilwoman Ball, I would like to hear your thoughts on this, please.
I guess at this point, I'm interested in hearing more or getting more information on what a call feature would do to does it change the rates? I guess
So a call feature, essentially, Michaela can discuss it more, is essentially your option to refinance.
right.
But now I will let Michaela say, I don't know, in a 15-year bond, Michaela, there is a point where you can't refinance whenever you want, right, Michaela? There's what, 7 years or something before you can do that?
Yes, that is correct, Mayor, members of the council. When we're looking at adding a call provision, it's the year that the bonds would be callable. Generally, I think, if we looked at about 8 years out, and at that point, if the interest rates have reduced to a point of providing present value savings for the current debt issue, then the bonds would be refinanced at that lower rate, and then the debt service estimates that I had provided would be based on whatever the current interest rates would be at that time. there are certain circumstances where if you added earlier call provisions, but generally you're going to pay more in interest as a result. So I think that's some additional information that we can provide. But I think, you've got the kind of the standard call feature that you would include, which if rates, and that's the big if rates go down at that point, that's when you would look at refinancing based on those lower rates and the savings made sense.
So I think what I'm hearing,
And is there a schedule that you would provide similar to this that would show sort of that scenario or that you could provide?
It would be, it's certainly something we could share. It'd be completely hypothetical, as we can't, there'd be an estimate of what we think future rates would be. So,
Correct.
it would just be an illustration of if, rates drop down to this, here's what your anticipated new debt service. So it would be more of illustrating what those savings or reduced debt service payments would be with interest rates declining.
And then we talked about the investment rate for cash on hand. Is there something we can get to sort of compare that advantage or disadvantage of retaining some of that cash on hand versus using it? Versus,
We can, like if we kept it in a money market or something, yeah, I can look at that. The key would be with cash on hand, it's not so much just retain it, it'd be retain it to be used at a later date. So eventually we are going to use that cash, we're not just gonna hold it.
right.
And perhaps it's for projects that are better cash finance versus bonding. That's always and I think as part of the long-term, the capital planning is, what makes sense to finance over a longer term through bonds as opposed to paying cash for. And I think that's the balance that you're trying to work through is what are those levels?
with regards,
And I don't think the city hall was on like the capital improvement plan yet, but I assume that would be at least like a 15-year sort of depreciation of that asset.
Yeah,
right?
so what we have in the capital plan currently, so again, with that, the idea there was, to quote what Michaela was saying, is that those are items generally that we're saying you don't want to bond. You don't want to, bond a $35,000 Ford Explorer. It's when you can pay cash for it. As for City Hall, there are elements already in that plan for kind of more of those minor improvements. So, in 10 years, if the AV system's got to get replaced, we've got money in there for that. Those kind of improvements. And one of the things that was discussed in July and that we're going to be working towards is adding a facilities perspective so that we don't end up where we're at today. That's kind of what we're already doing with the public safety building, where a couple years ago we increased the annual maintenance budget to that so that we can be doing things like, okay, at this point windows need to be replaced, at this point the roof's going to be replaced, and we can budget those out so we don't end up in a situation where we're in City Hall where everything is due. So that's something we can work on, and I know with Seth, when the communications with them would be, they would easily be able to, with the remodel, once it's done, easily put things on a plan moving forward to say, okay, at 15 years this, 10 years this, 5 years this, because at that point it's also everything's mostly new, and then they can easily put a capital plan together to do that.
yeah, I think that just a little bit more information, just kind of what we discussed, to be able to just see a couple more scenarios, and I would be,
Like a better side by side would
yeah,
be helpful. I think.
exactly. The side by side would be helpful. Looking at, if up to 18 months, I know it's completely a guess, but if interest rates did drop, how would that change that? But I think, looking at this, I think we'll be able to come up with some, number that we feel comfortable putting cash towards, and then the rest bonding.
But I think it needs to include, this is what's left in bonding capacity. This is what's left with cash in hand.
Correct.
Yes, I've had conversations with Administrator Chansky. At this point, the city is committed to the 3 million. Now, Bushman is committed to final design. It hasn't been put out the bid, it's not voted to go forward. The expense is known, so that's part of the equation. And again, the equipment capital improvement plan And streets, I mean, streets is going to be very expensive, and we need to look at the overall picture, not just tunnel vision on one project.
I doubted if the council, in making the commitments of designing everything that's gone into Bushman Road at this point, which goes to hundreds of thousands of dollars, is hardly not going to move forward and construct that. I would find that extremely hard to believe.
So what I'm hearing is what we can do, come back with some side-by-sides, so we can even include, to even Councilmember Scott's comment right now, even include Bushman, what that would look like at this point, because now we're gonna, not making a decision today, obviously bonding calendars and things are gonna have to be updated and all that. So we can come back with some of those side-by-side, maybe putting some of these more side-by-side instead of individual, include what I think to Councilmember Ball's request, maybe some call option, what those features might look like. Again, I have hypothetical numbers, but at least to help you understand what that looks like. Again, to Councilmember Jensen's request, some scenarios of if we bond versus cash, what that might look like, especially as we are looking at Bushman as well in the equipment, in the CIP plan.
Would it make sense to do this at like a special council meeting that would be specifically to this, so we could have a little bit more time to actually like discuss this? Or do you think
I
this
guess
would be
that's
on
up to
something on a regular council meeting?
I think at this point, I think we'll need some time to do those scenarios. So I don't think it's something that we'll necessarily be ready to discuss at the budget workshop. And plus, we're
Okay.
gonna wanna focus, when I get to that item later in the agenda, we wanna focus, have that be solely for that. So maybe this, if the council wants, maybe is a good September workshop discussion. Give us some time to come back with everything that you've requested. So then with that, what we would be looking for then tonight would be to adopt the attached reimbursement resolution. So we need to do that because, so we have that in place moving forward. The other thing I do want to talk about is the fire truck. Is that something you want to wait and bond with the City Hall later or Bushman later and push that off a little more? Or do you want to just begin that bonding process on that one right away so we can get reimbursed for that? Michaela, do you want to speak a little bit to what the equipment bonding process looks like? Because it is different than the CIP, than the City Hall.
Yes, so I know in your packet, you've got a schedule of events that that had included the financing for both projects as including the City Hall and the fire truck reimbursement. What we had factored into this schedule of events was with the financing for the City Hall, we did have an extra action item being the public hearing regarding the capital improvement plan, and then the 30-day wait period before the reverse referendum and then into the sale. So what we were looking at is if the council authorized, consider the resolution authorizing the sale, that would be at September 3rd meeting. In the schedule that you have, it also included a public hearing on the capital improvement plan. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is based on the timing for that public hearing and the 30-day time period. We were looking at a tentative special council meeting for the sale of the bonds of October 21st. And again, that would be sale of the bonds to include that extra step for the capital improvement plan and the City Hall financing. We had looking at the calendar, you don't have this version in front of you, but if we were looking at removing the capital improvement portion of the project, I think we would be able to have the sale be on the actual council meeting scheduled in October, I think of October 7th, and then that would not require a special meeting. So in short, the schedule before you includes all the steps leading up to the actual sale, and most of those steps, with the exception of the notice of the public hearing and the public hearing itself and the 30-day wait period, would all be as part of the normal bond issuance process leading up to the sale at the council meeting in October. Again, that's based on this timeline and this schedule. Again, if we were including the capital improvement plan and financing for the city hall with the extra steps, we were looking at a special council meeting on October 21st to meet all the timeline dates.
So Michaela's clarification, if the council were to just do the fire truck, we could do that on September 3rd?
You would you'd authorize the sale on September 3rd and then be looking at selling the bonds on October 7th.
Okay.
Yep.
And it would be the same,
The fire
is there a
truck,
benefit to do both the same time, or is it just?
the benefit of doing both at the same time was that then you have a bigger total issuance, which then is more attractive to the buyers of the bonds, and therefore, again, kind of affects the interest rate. So that was
And
that.
I would, yeah.
Go ahead, Michaela.
And I would add, sorry, I was just going to add as well that, with combining the two bond issues, part of this process does include a rating, obtaining a rating, and by including them, there would be one rating for both purposes of the bonds, and then so there would be some savings on the cost of issuance with having two projects being financed at the same time, from both the rating standpoint and then the process for the issuance itself.
Are we losing anything by waiting?
We're out $1.45 million. That we
Oh,
currently don't
you're
have.
saying-
I think we're not in a position where if we don't do it, we're gonna be broke. But there's that money that we currently do not have, that $1.45 million.
But if we waited to bond with the other project, we would still be getting that just at a later date.
Yes, so that's just, it just
couple
comes down,
months, or-
down to of how long, when are you wanting to bond? If you're bond for City Hall, that's what I'm just getting at. You don't have to do the fire truck right now. I wouldn't recommend, if the discussion is, well, we're gonna bond City Hall next April, my recommendation was, well, get the fire truck out of the way, let's get our money back on that and not wait to do that.
Right.
If the idea is we're still gonna bond in the next 3 to 4 months, I think that's still, we can hold that over. That's just something I wanted you to think about, is that you could move forward with the equipment CIP because it doesn't have that public hearing reverse referendum period like the City Hall would.
And it might be a little bit easier to predict the interest rates in the next couple months versus trying to predict them next April.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, I really don't like what I think I'm hearing. And what that is the recognition, and I believe there's a certain level of concern amongst the council on that 30-day period of a reverse referendum. The bonding for the truck not requiring that moves forward. Now we have 1.5 million than we had before. And now all of a sudden, paying cash for the short-term capital needs becomes more financially feasible. So you can say what you want, it's a massive shell game
Councilman
at
Scott,
the taxpayer's expense.
the reimbursement of the fire truck was always in my financial calculations that I presented previously.
Correct. That was always in the plan. So,
It's irrespective of the fact that if you move forward with issuing bonds of $1.4 million, the city's going to have $1.4 million. We're going to get our money from Pequot, gives the council an additional $1.4 million at your disposal to pay cash for other things like City Hall.
so are you making a recommendation to bond today?
I'm making a recommendation that I don't think the majority of the council truly understands what a financial plan and financial commitment looks like for a community when you're using taxpayer money. That's the recommendation I would make.
I mean, my
quite
recommendation
frankly.
was going to be just to wait and bundle them together,
Yes.
like we had.
And I would
sort
like
of
to see that happen
in the
before the
past,
end of the
but
year.
I-
Yeah. I'm not thinking that we would wait till April to do that. I think that we would be, whatever the next, would be making the decision October 21st? Is that what?
Well, at this point, I think what we would talked about is if we come back and have a discussion, set a workshop in September, then October, we would be doing, kind of kicking off the process.
Okay. I think I would feel comfortable with one more session.
If I look at the calendar right now, depending on when you held the workshop, one of the issues that we have when it comes to the kind of, Michaela and I have been talking about, and this is an issue I've actually been talking with League of Minnesota Cities about, is publication deadlines. Because our paper runs once a week, and the state statute does require that public hearings be noticed in the physical paper. Statute requires a public notice be issued, a public notice for a public hearing on a bond be 14 days. So, for example, if you wanted to do a public hearing, say, instead of when we're talking about September 3rd, October 7th, we have to get it in, in this situation, it actually would have to be 14 days.
16th, right?
The 18th, yeah, so it'd have to be in the 18th paper, we would have to have it to the paper by the 16th. So we need a decision by then, if you wanted to move forward and get the process rolling on October 7th.
I think that was what
So then
Councilwoman Ball was saying.
Then we were just getting that we would have to have the workshop, either we discuss it at the regular council meeting on the 3rd, or we have to have the workshop prior to the 16th, so I can get the public notice in the paper.
But at the workshop, wouldn't we be needing to make a decision?
We could, yeah, you could do it as
So
a special meeting.
it'd have to be a
just at the
special
regular.
meeting.
So we
Okay.
could do this at the regular meeting in September if you prefer.
And obviously, if
So-
we come to an agreement, we can change our mind about bonding or getting reimbursed for the
At
prior
the-
truck.
yeah.
At a September meeting or an October meeting. So I guess my thought was, I still think bundling them is a good idea if we move forward with bonding
I agree.
for
Yeah, and I
the,
couldn't disagree more,
City Hall.
because again, it's back to a shell game. It's back to hedging against the fact that there's not that waiting period for the capital portion of the bond, which essentially gives the council 1.5 million more to work with in cash.
Sorry,
All you're accomplishing.
I'm just trying to clarify. They suggested to hold off on issuing the bond. You're suggesting to issue the bond?
Mike, come on.
I'm really honestly
You know what I've
confused.
been suggesting the whole way.
I was asking the same question, I guess.
That given the needs in this community, given the fact we lack a long-range capital plan, given the fact that, yes, there's needs for City Hall and a lot of other things, the council's already made the commitment. You guys have already voted to approve moving forward with in excess of a $3 million City Hall project.
Correct.
So I think you know where I'm at and what I've been saying the whole time. There has not been near the amount of time that should have been spent figuring out what are the actual needs. And then come alongside of that with an appropriate financial commitment and hopefully a plan.
So knowing that we're going forward,
I'm not.
you don't know that we're going, no, I'm saying the council, this council has agreed to go forward. A 3-2 vote, correct?
Something like that.
Is it not?
I think you know the answer to that, Mike, don't you?
I don't know if you do at this point. Is it a 3-2 vote,
Okay. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So at this point, what we're trying to discuss is when do we go to issuance for bond?
Right.
The discussion was if we should delay, but then you're saying that that's not the right way. I'm trying to figure out what is, in your mind, what is the best way to go about for the bonding, since we've committed to doing this? Is it to?
I haven't committed to
This is a
doing
council
anything.
body for a reason. I mean, this is how.
Isn't it though?
works.
And yet for how many meetings, month over month, I have been ignored. Anything I've had to say has been dismissed.
Okay, we are.
I'm asking for your
Now you're
true,
asking for my opinion at the point that you've overcommitted taxpayer dollars to projects.
Councilman Maroney, I think it's
Give
in
me
your
a
best interest to
break.
move forward. I think for you to just, what is your,
I'm fine with waiting at this point.
okay.
Do you want this to be back with our analysis for September 3rd?
Yes, I think that would be the best thing.
Okay.
And then we can decide then, and if we need to issue it alone, we will, but at least we'll have more information, more numbers to run through, and hopefully we can come to a decision. But I think that would be the best.
So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, at this point, my recommendation would just be to adopt the attached resolution declaring the intent of the city of Breezy Point to reimburse certain expenditures for capital improvements from the proceeds of taxes and bonds or other obligations to be issued by the city. So this is that reimbursement resolution. So that way we can just get that out of the way as we proceed down this process.
Do I have a motion?
I'll also move.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
So just to clarify, this is in relationship to the $3 million commitment to City Hall?
Correct. The fire truck, that reimbursement resolution was done at the beginning, was done earlier this year. So this one's specifically for the City Hall portion.
So I'm just noticing there's no dollar amount in there. A dollar amount has been riddled all over the information we've got
There
tonight,
is.
not to
Right here,
exceed.
not to a principal amount not to exceed $3,030,000.
So what happens if that amount is in fact exceeded?
You can't.
Well, so, okay, another point of concern. What I recall the council having discussed at the last meeting, when the decision was made to move forward with City Hall, is it was done knowing that there were going to be additional expenditures that were going to be incurred. I believe it was referred to as add-ons.
There was discussion of that, and that was voted down against.
That's correct.
Well, I beg to differ. I think that was part of the successful motion.
I think
So-
it's in the meeting minutes
Yeah.
that
It was
no
not-
one
there
seconded my
was-
motion,
yes,
and
there
so
was-
that's not
yes.
moving forward.
That is correct.
It's in the packet.
Yeah, that did not pass.
But there's nothing in reality that would stop the council from exceeding that amount,
We
correct? You're
can't.
just paying cash for it?
Correct. If the cost of the project were to end up exceeding $3,030,000, you just have to pay cash or find some other financing.
Well, I just want that concern of mine noted in the minutes, if you don't mind.
Okay. Any other discussion? Anything else?
I'll just go on, that this is allowing us to bond for it. Again, that's something that we discussed in the last meeting, and I think it's just allowing us that 18-month gap of when we want to go for bonding on that.
But it also doesn't limit you to just spending $3 million. And therein lies my concern. Because I have every reason to believe that at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Michaela. Is she still on?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the Streets Committee member appointments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So on July 1st, you did establish by resolution an ad hoc streets committee. And then, as we said, we immediately began advertising for the committee, which is comprised of 5 members, and then a liaison from the city council, and then also obviously supported by staff. Applications were taken until
26.
yes, July 26th. To be clear, that was, people could apply afterwards. That was kind of more the deadline for the packet. We got 5 applications. We have not received any applications since. Those applications were reviewed and are been nominated by Mayor Zierden, being Mr. Jason Gore, Mr. John Monier, Mr. Tom Nelson, Mr. Craig O'Reilly, and Mr. Leonard Sod for appointment. So what we'll be looking for tonight would be the council to confirm Mayor Zierden's nominations of these gentlemen. And then also after that, separately, the council will need to discuss and appoint a liaison to the committee amongst yourselves.
I first want to say I'm really excited about these 5. All of them have, whether it's council experience, streets experience, working for the city. So I think the 5 of them are really going to have a lot of value to add to the streets plan. So I'm excited.
I would agree.
I agree.
They have good backgrounds and will be a great asset to help the city navigate the street CIP.
Were these the 5 applications that we got for the committee, or how many
Correct.
more were there? So there was 5 in total?
I'm sorry?
There was 5 applications received in total by the city?
Correct.
For this committee?
Correct.
So in terms of options and recommendations, I mean, it's really the 5 that applied, right?
Unless you believe that one of these gentlemen shouldn't be appointed.
I have no reason to believe that none of them should be appointed. I was just asking clarification
Correct.
on, are these the 5 that applied, or did we have more?
Yeah, we
This
have
is
not
all.
received any other applications. So all these 5 gentlemen applied by the 26th, and we have not received any applications since. So these are the 5 that have applied. So, correct.
Was it ever decided, I guess I don't recall where we left off with, when we look to a committee like this and the work that they're going to be doing largely on helping bring about a kind of short, mid, and long range road improvement plan, whether or not this committee is going to be a continuing committee or not, meaning that as city council members come and go, we would try to maintain, to the extent possible, of course, long-term representation on this committee so that it wouldn't be subject to the whims, if you will, of the change in mayor.
So to your question, the ad hoc committee, as it's the resolution that was adopted by the council, there was no term limit. So pretty much said these people, whoever gets appointed is being appointed until the job is done. Again, the idea of an ad hoc committee is once the CIP is done, the council would then decide either to disband the ad hoc committee or potentially, I think more than likely it would be to establish it as a standing committee. And then once it's established as a standing committee, it would be like any other committee where there would be term limits that come up, a couple every year or something like that. But as it stands right now, until the council says the job is done or alters the committee as a body, these people will make up the committee, regardless of the results of the November election.
Correct. And we did discuss this already, so this was already a discussion that we had. But yes, we are very lucky with the 5 that we did get. So I think that otherwise, for the streets liaison, that's the next item.
We didn't have actually a formal motion on.
Oh, do you want us to vote for that?
Yes.
Not together?
We
Okay.
do. The council needs to confirm
Yep.
those 5.
I'll make a motion to accept the 5 applicants.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion?
I just want to clarify that I only know a couple of the members here that applied. I don't know all of them, and I certainly don't have anything against any of them or their background or what they can contribute. I am going to vote no, and it has largely to do with just not having any confidence in the mayor's recommendations.
I'm sorry, these were the 5 that applied, Councilman
Exactly.
Scott. That has nothing to do with me.
Oh.
Right, maybe some candidate recruitment on your end next time. All right,
I can speak to the fact that I have talked to 3 out of the 5, and I think they're highly qualified. There's 2 that applied for the committee that I've never talked to, but I have talked to 3 out of the 5. And
Yeah, and I'm familiar with one of them from
Lab.
being on the fire district board, so.
Again, and like I said, I know a couple of them.
And their applications are great, so.
And I've got nothing against their backgrounds and what they can contribute. It's got more to do with.
I don't have anything to do with the 5 that applied, Councilman Scott, so just please stop.
Well, then why does it
Please
make
stop.
reference to the mayor
Councilman
recommending?
Scott, because that's what the mayor
Mayor has
does.
to
Councilman Scott, just stop.
Accept the recommendation.
Please. Okay, just please. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, anybody from, I know Councilman Johnson, you mentioned wanting to.
yeah, I would be happy to be the,
I'll make a motion to nominate Steve Jensen as the liaison.
I'll second.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Staff reports.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just briefly tonight, members of the council, the August edition of the Breezy Brief e-newsletter will be published this week. We're just finishing that, so probably the next day or so. On elections note, just a few things. The state primary is a week from tomorrow, so Tuesday, August 13th. Early voting is still underway. You can early vote all the way into next Monday. If anyone would like to early vote, that can be done at the Crow Wing County Historic Courthouse. So you have to go down to Brainerd to do that. If you have any question about absentee balloting, you also should reach out to the Crow Wing County election staff. They do that on our behalf. Next Tuesday, August 13th, for an election day, in-person voting will be held here at City Hall, 8319 County Road 11, Breezy Point. Polls open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. We have a fantastic crew of election judges yet again, so we will plan on processing everyone who chooses to vote in an efficient manner, and a fair manner, and an accurate manner. Lastly, on elections, filing for office for the city of Breezy Point that is open, that started on July 30, also runs to August 13 at 5 p.m. So the deadline per the state statute is 5 p.m. Even though we will be open past 5 p.m., I cannot accept any affidavits of candidacy after 5 p.m. on the 13th. Anyone looking to file can come into City Hall, see myself or Deb. It does have to be myself or Deb per statute, as I'm the clerk and she is the deputy clerk. Filing fee for that is $10. As a reminder, the seats that will be on the ballot in November are the mayor, which is a 2-year term, and 2 council seats that are 4-year terms. With that, I guess I'll hand it over to Sergeant Garcia. Do you want to speak about tomorrow night?
Tomorrow, I have a couple things. If you
Okay, and whatever you have.
Tomorrow night, just a reminder, everyone, 6 to 8, night to night, here at the City Hall Park. Come out and meet with us in the police department, other first responders. We'll have static set up here. There will be hot dogs and brats out there and stuff like that. I look forward to seeing everybody out there. So it's always a good time. Weather's supposed to be nice. So. Kind of to piggyback, we did get an email from Sylvia Swanson, Breezy Point resident, in reference to her husband, Wayne Swanson, who Officer Rustad and I received one of our awards for, and she asked that it be read at the council. And it just says, we would like to say we are so thankful for Sergeant Joe Garcia and Officer Kyle Rustad. They responded to a 911 call at our home in Breezy Point. Their quick response saved Wayne's life. He was flown to St. Cloud. All the medical people in St. Cloud commented on what a great job they did. I also received phone calls following the following week from the police department checking on Wayne. We in Breezy Point are truly blessed with our first responders and police department. Words cannot express how grateful we are. They were going to try and attend, but because Wayne's still recuperating, they were unable, and specifically asked that this be read to the attendees at today's council meeting. And then on a separate note, the police department would like to thank the City of Breezy Point residents and the council just for investing in such a quality department. And so one of the ways you do that is through the high quality equipment and training you provide your police officers. In late July, we responded to a residence here in Breezy Point for a report of an assault with an armed suspect who was then threatening suicide because of some of the equipment that you've purchased us, including our new ballistic shields and our new tasers. We were able to resolve that without any major injuries or incidents. It should be noted that we were able to handle that in a way that we wouldn't have been able to as safely without that stuff. And we had literally just taken the shields out of the box that day when that happened. So thank you to the council, and thank you to the residents that support your police department. It doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe
Thank
or
you.
Peter, do either of you have anything for the council today? Okay. That's all for staff reports, Madam Mayor.
Okay, all right. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I have something. I talked to Administrator Chansky briefly before the meeting. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to drive Bushman Road and where the survey stakes are, but there's 2 properties, the Lindgren, which is the former Merritt property, and the Bushman residence, that those stakes, I understand there's 33-foot easement, but to get Paul Sandy from WSB back in here to say, this is where the temporary easements are gonna go, this is the permanent, and are they gonna have to destroy, you know, half the yard? In the case of the Lindgren property, I mean, he's got some beautiful pine trees, he's got caution tape all around them, but I think it bears just showing this is what's temporary, this is permanent. But those two properties, without knowing, you know, what Mr. Sandy has to say, he briefly explained it to me last month, but it was before the meeting, but I think it's something the council should hear. In the case of the Lindgren property, he wasn't aware. You know, he flat out didn't know. All the paperwork was signed by the previous owner. It was in the middle of a sale, but I think we need to have Mr. Sandy provide that information.
And Mr. Lindgren did reach out, and WSB has made contact with him. It was just one of those, again, as Councilman Jensen said, change of ownership in the middle of the process.
All right, we will go ahead and move on to the agenda forecast.
Thank you.
Actually, I had something I wanted to bring up. I'm not sure if others on the council received the email. I did get an email from Councilmember Jensen, so I'm not sure if that meant that he had gotten the same email or exactly how that worked. But I'd gotten an email from a property owner expressing some level of concern with noise past apparently a 10 o'clock hour, in which things like outdoor music and so forth should not be occurring. So I guess I responded to staff just simply asking, what ordinance do we have to that effect? How does, obviously knowing that the resort primarily has outdoor music during the summertime, kind of work or fit into our ordinance that would apply to that? And I feel as a council member and as a collective council, there's likely something there that we should spend some more time on looking into and talking about. I don't know if it's just a simple matter of, you know, a reminder of what that cutoff time is, or how best to approach it. But I wanted to just bring that forward. Again, I had a resident that reached out to me, and I didn't know if it was directly as the only council member that they reached out to, or...
It was all of us.
Yeah.
It was, okay. So I don't know how that, you know, is going to fit into our upcoming meetings. I just, I feel that we should spend some time in conversation around what ordinance currently is in place that kind of would work to manage those situations.
I think
Yeah.
Sergeant Garcia responded to council on sort of the history on that. I don't know if you
Yeah, I really appreciated the
Yeah.
thoroughness of that.
want to share any of that.
So I was asked by Administrator Chansky to look into the situation. I queried our records management system. We have, since 2007, which as far as our easy records to look at go, we have 2 actual documented complaints on the music performances from Dockside. Additionally, I've heard anecdotal complaints over several years. I don't have an exact count, but maybe a dozen times over the years, but I haven't heard anything. I can say confidently until now, for at least the last year. I do know that previous police administrators have spoken with the resort. They've always been amenable to stopping their music at 10. Sometimes, you know, artists extend their playtime sometimes, and I reached out to resort management today. I advised them of the complaint, and they were going to contact their recurring acts and remind them of the stop time for that. So,
Is that 10 o'clock?
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any way when we're getting emails, all as council members, that can be somehow identified to us? I mean, part of the concern would be, are we in some way, you know, receiving all the same information, having a level of interaction or dialogue outside of a meeting that could create an issue with the open meeting law.
I think the way we had it was set up through the website is that the way it's set up, where you essentially they're emailing you all, but you're getting individually, is to the intention to avoid open meeting law violations, because you can respond back to the person, but it's only just you and that person, and you're not ending up with an accidental reply all situation. That's why it's set up the way it is. So
Are you getting those as well? So if
I
they-
do get,
okay,
anytime
so-
someone
okay.
submits something to the council as a body, I also get a copy of it.
Well, and so that's what I'm kind of getting at. Would you be able to just tell us as a council that this went to everyone? So imagine a scenario where I don't know that, and I have conversation with Steve. Steve has a discussion with Mike. Now all of a sudden, we've got conversation going on with 3 council members.
Yeah, I can do that, absolutely. If we ever get one of those, all council member emails, I can just shoot, as soon as I see it, shoot something out to the council that says, FYI, this was an all council email. I can
Perfect.
do that, no problem.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the agenda forecast.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So this month, as I alluded to earlier, we are looking to, requesting a workshop. Again, looking at what we've been doing that third week of the month, August 19th to 23rd, if the council is available. The sole topic of the discussion would be the preliminary 2025 budget. So we just be looking forward, if the council has a date, that week of the 19th through the 23rd, that you would all be available to come together and work through that preliminary budget.
Well, I can make it easy for me. I am outstate the rest of the month as of this Friday. So I unfortunately am not available.
I can't Thursday night.
My availability is the 19th, 20th.
Yeah, mine too.
Is only the 19th or not the 19th?
No, 19th and 20th.
Yep, those
I
are
mean, I
mine.
could possibly make the 21st and 22nd, but it would be tight getting here.
It's on the 20th, but I can on the 19th.
Well, it sounds like the 19th is a winner then.
All right,
6 PM as usual.
Yes.
That's,
Yeah.
You want that as a motion?
that's fine.
oh, sure.
I'll make a motion to set a workshop for Monday, August 19th at 6 PM at City Hall to discuss budget.
Second.
Any other discussion?
Just a point of clarification, I know we've been down this discussion already with what's identified as a workshop, also really constituting a special council meeting. So I think it would be important to just clarify, is it the council's intentions to truly have a workshop in which no formal decisions are going to be made?
Yep, that's,
Or is this being viewed as more of an additional council meeting
So
in the month of August?
the last meeting that we called was a special meeting. This is being called as a workshop. So no official meeting, decisions will be formulated or voted on at that meeting.
Correct.
Direction given, but no formal motions to move forward with anything.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All right,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.